what messages were you taught in your family of origin that set you up or perpetuated areas of sexual brokenness in your life? Like I
Jeez.
said, I can see the path that led to my
Yeah.
sexual brokenness very clearly, and it was very heavily influenced by the insecurities I had as a Black girl.
100%. I know for me, like one word, and there's many that I could use, but one word that really jumps out to me the most is secrecy.
Mm.
Like,
Mm.
and like lying, because I grew up in a home where we didn't talk about those things. And having to do this whole image management thing of like, I'm trying to fit in this crowd, like I'm like a chameleon. There's a sense of withholding your true authentic self and who you are, including your sexual brokenness.
Mhm.
And so because I learned that we don't talk about these things, like, well, I don't want you to know these things about me.
Mm.
I don't want you to know the stuff that I did on this on the late night tip, as they would say. Like, so that, like, secrecy for me was a huge thing that I absorbed. And like I know Pete Scazzaro, I love his work. I remember going through emotionally healthy spirituality, and like he goes to the genogram. In the chapter going back to Go Forward, he talks about looking at your family of origin and understanding like you make up, don't quote me on this, I don't remember the exact number, but you make up like 3 to 5 generations.
Mm.
And it's like their stories impact that story, which
Right.
impacts that story, which shapes you. And it's like you've inherited several different messages from several different generations. And just to think how crazy, and I know we talked about this before, like for me, we're talking about generations, like slavery
Yes.
is a part of that. And just understanding like some of the messages from slavery, like, okay, well, performance,
Perform.
I got to work to earn my value, or I have to be quiet. I can't talk about this because I might be punished, or like like all these different layers that impacted the generations before me, that kind of messages that I've heard today of like, no, you got to work, earn your right, like earn your worth. You got to perform. You got to work hard. Like we don't talk about stuff. We don't deal with pain. Like we got to power through. And so all of those things impacted, at least for me, my view, my world with sexual brokenness. And so,
Yeah, and like
Yeah.
what you like our family line also comes from descendants of slaves. Like it was like two or three generations back. The slave owner couldn't have kids, and believe it or not, his wife's name was Sarah, and my ancestor's name was Hagar, and
wow.
that's where our line comes
Wow.
from.
Yeah.
And so having that, I remember my mom even saying, "Oh, we have somebody in our line that went to the store and they jacked the price because he was a Black guy, and he confronted the store owner and he was hanged." And so it's like, that's real trauma. That's not that far back. Yeah. And so that's where understanding more of that helped me to understand my mom. And when I finally started talking with her as an adult, I found out that she was raped by her lieutenant in the Army as a virgin. And if she didn't do it, he was going to leave her in KKK territory. And so all of a sudden, my picture started connecting. And I'm like,
wow,
this is important for us to talk about with our kids if this is part of our story, as it is with our sexual brokenness, like the whole story, not just understanding the whole narrative. Because when my mom would say things like, do your hair like this, she was trying to minimize trauma for me from her trauma. But it was screwing up my own confidence in who God made me be.
So
and
true.
so when she was trying to protect me from things that she experienced, or you're going to have to work harder because white people normally get the jobs. That came out of her trauma, that white people would get the jobs over her in 1960, you know? And so her saying that you need to perform like this, look like this, don't be too loud, don't be too Black. And it was really just shaping this little soul of, I need to look and act like this. And that came out of her trauma, and that impacted who I ended up marrying and what I ended up doing and what I ended up thinking I was good enough for.
Yeah, even like the secrets, like don't speak up because you're gonna speak about like ill about our family name. Like keep quiet. Like no, don't, like they said, like don't say anything about Uncle Gary, whoever he is. Like don't say nothing about that because
sorry,
that's
Uncle
some
Gary.
of them. I don't have Uncle Gary. I'm just making up names. But like, and to that point, we heard through our counselor, which is lives with us forever, is what doesn't get transformed gets transmitted. So like whatever trauma does not get processed, dealt with, transformed, like you will transmit that to not only every context that you're in, but like generationally. My girls will inherit my trauma because I didn't do my due diligence of being responsible and taking ownership from the things that I inherited that were outside of my control. And
Right.
so
Yeah, I would
Um,
say to your guys' thoughts is knowing that there's an element of shame, the shame that we carry. It's being able to like tell yourself, like being able to hug yourself, like going, okay, this is my mom's story. That shame isn't all from the decisions I've made. That shame is
Right.
something that was put on me. And when you become aware of your upbringing, you're able to forgive
Yes.
because you're
Yeah.
like, oh wait, I understand why my mom did that.
Yes.
But we don't know that as children.
No, we
That's
don't.
like you're saying, it's corrupting our own self-image. But not all the shame we carry is our fault. And I just feel like if people could just release themselves, like how as a child are you going to be responsible for the poor decisions of the people before you? And that's why it's so important that we make those changes now. Like for me, like I mentioned earlier, there's really a story of just abandonment in my childhood. There's really a
and
story,
abuse.
yeah, of abuse and fatherlessness is a theme in my story. And that really messed with me. I was talking with my husband earlier about these questions, and I was like, man, like it led to a love addiction. And this is crazy. I remember, so my sophomore year is when I started entering into what I'd call serious relationships. And from the age of 15 until I got married, I was in a relationship.
Yeah.
10
And
years.
and these, some of them were years long, 2 years long. And even after I said yes to God, I was entering into these
Yeah.
relationships. And I would say, like, oh, it's okay, I'm in this relationship because they love Jesus. But then I would compromise.
Right.
And then I'd have shame.
Yes.
And then I'd be convicted. And then I'd be laying, just to be honest with you, next to the person in the bed, like, God, help me, rescue me from this situation. And God did that. And that's a whole nother story, like God rescuing me from
girl,
that.
you-
But
Are we having disclosure?
No.
I'm just kidding.
I'm just
No,
like,
I'm not-
I'm really proud of my wife. I'm really proud of
But
her.
I'm just
Yeah.
like, to get back to the core, to
Yeah.
get back to the point is like, I can literally transport myself back to those
Yes.
times
Mhm.
and see the brokenness, see the disposition that I was in, and not saying it's like, it's all my father's fault, it's all my mom's fault, because when we do that, it's like we naturally say that person's all good or that person's all bad.
Yeah.
But I am aware that they were also at a disposition. And so, yeah, that really played a role in how I chose boyfriends, how I treated my relationships. I felt like I couldn't say no to people.
Yeah. I
No.
felt that way.
Like, okay, I got to do this because, I need, like, I said this to my husband earlier. I said, even though what I was engaging in was breaking me, I made this weird correlation that I needed that validation so much that I was willing to compromise
Yeah.
my sexual integrity.
Yeah.
Like, how awful is that?
Yeah.
Like, God, I'm willing to sacrifice my body because I need the affirmation. I'm not getting it from my home. And quite frankly, I'm not getting it from you, God. Not, like, obviously, this is not where I am today. But that's the dialogue I had.
Yeah.
And I was like, God, it's more worth it to me that this person says they love me.
Yeah.
It's more worth it to me that this person says I look beautiful, because I needed my cup filled.
But you did bring up a good point though about the fatherlessness, that is just statistically higher in Black homes. Incarceration, arrest rate, prostitution, that's all higher. And so it like we have to keep breaking the cycles,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, it's
but,
cycles.
But we have to have the resources, tools, and awareness, and bringing that shame down to break the cycles, because we know that shame drives addiction, and we're stuck in these shame cycles. So I think that probably is more so anything that we're this conversation is about breaking shame cycles,
Yeah.
because that's what leads to addiction. And
Yeah.
ours happens to be some racism in our shame cycle, but somebody else may have another,
No, that's so
Yeah.
good. And to tie it back to race, there was one particular lie I can remember to this day in my childhood. And my grandfather was a very dark-skinned man. And being that, my family unit was biracial, and me and my siblings all looked different. We had various tones of skin.
Very different.
I actually was the darkest in my family. And I guess when I was a toddler, he told my mom she's going to have a hard life because her skin is darker. And when people speak those words over you, they don't realize
it's a mantle.
the distance that it goes.
The power that it has.
Which is so interesting because I'm close to your skin color.
Right.
And I'm the lightest one in my family because we're also mixed and we're all different shades. My brother was full black, but I'm the lightest. And so my siblings always heard the message, Ashley's eyes are lighter, the opposite message.
Yeah.
And so it just confused me because that's the message I heard at home. And then, boop, I'm in school. I'm the only black person. So now I'm the darkest.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I'm so confused. I don't know who I am.
No, that's so real.
And you know what's crazy? Like, this is funny, but not funny. Like, so within my family, like, and my wife probably, she knows it, but like, within my own family, like, we joke about who's the darkest sometimes. Like, oh man, you're so dark. That it was like, that's so awful. But like, even that comparison of like lighter skin or darker skin happens within
we
a dark
laugh
skin
away our shame.
Exactly.
To
like,
feel more comfortable.
And that's why we say on this podcast, it's going to be different for everybody because all my kids, they're like, I wish I was darker. I wish, we're kind of like same look from the outside. It looks the same, right?
Yeah.
But the trauma can be just so different depending on the family.
Yeah.
So really looking at what lies your family or your upbringing or generational curses have been passed down so that whatever it is, we can start breaking it.